What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the MLS Power Ranking Show for Week 25, live on Twitter Spaces, 2 p.m. Eastern every single Tuesday. On my Twitter handle, I'm Andrew Wiebe. My Twitter is Andrew_Wiebe. As always, joined by Matt Doyle, Matt Doyle 76 on Twitter. But you know that. Everybody follows Doyle. If you care about MLS, Power Rankings are out on MLSsoccer.com and the MLS app. Go check those out. Our format stays the same. 10 teams. We choose the teams. We pick some guests. We run through it rapid fire for you to catch you up on everything you may be aware of or might be missing around the world of Major League Soccer. And we start on this Tuesday, August 16th, with the Seattle Sounders, who are in a position they're not really accustomed to being in. Jeremiah Oshan, ninth in the West, 1 point below the playoff line. All is not lost. Of course, they are CCL champions. But a loss at home to RSL is not what the doctor ordered or what Brian Schmetzer ordered.
It certainly was not. It was, I think, to me, it felt like a must-win game, and they didn't win. But thanks to the log jam that is the playoff race right now, it feels like there's no reason to think that there's no reason to give up on the season. But this 3-game road trip they're going on right now, I think is going to go a long way to determine whether or not this is a salvageable season for them.
What is not working right
now? What is working, right? They're not scoring. They're not playing particularly good defense. I don't think they're horrible. They're losing a lot of 1-goal games. And, I went back and crunched some numbers last week, and I guess it would be true this week, but I think they're 6-11-2 in games decided by 1 goal or less. And if they were just getting points at their normal clip under Brian Schmetzer, they'd have 5, 6, 7 more points than they have right now. And they'd be, solidly in a playoff position. But they're just not, they're just missing that little something that they have traditionally had, especially under Schmetzer, where they're able to get results, not necessarily wins in all these games, but just they're not getting, the Atlanta game was a perfect example of what's going wrong, where they actually played pretty well. I think they played a road game on short rest just about perfectly. They were on the front foot going towards the end. It looked like they were the team more likely to grab the winner if anyone did. And then they sort of just shut off and give up a wide open shot, granted from 25 yards, and it was a great hit by Andrew Gutman. But and then against RSL, the same type of stuff where they just sort of fall asleep on a counterattack that it was a great pass, but not necessarily a kind of counter that they should have, that they had to give up. And then on the second goal, right after they score, Andrew Brody is allowed to just ghost in at the far post and get an open look at goal, from 5 yards out or whatever. It's the kind of stuff that we're not used to seeing the Sounders do.
No, we're really not. And I think that's the bigger concern, is that defensively they haven't been able to. In the past, when they've had bad patches, they've just been able to lock in defensively and grind out 1-0s or 1-1s even. And that has kind of disappeared during this regular season. And there's not one specific thing to put a finger on. In the attack, though, we got to talk about Nuhu. And Nuhu, I think the first 2/3 of last year, you could have argued he was the defender of the year in MLS. I think a lot of people did argue that he was the defender of the year in MLS. Nuhu this year is very, very different. And to me, it comes down to the system change and the position change that's built into that.
I think there's certainly truth to that. He's not, I think his strengths were highlighted as a left center back last year. And like you said, that was when he was playing at a defender of the year level. That seems to still be his best position. And he's never been great going forward. But I think the trade-off right now is that he's not this lockdown defender that he had been before as well. He's never been a perfect player. But he seems to have gotten it into his head that he needs to be more involved in the attack. And and he's not effective going. I mean, he's just really, really not effective going forward. And he hasn't turned into a bad defender, but he's not blowing up the defensive metrics either.
Right. But on top of that, the knock-on effect in terms of going forward is he and Jordan Morris are just not a good fit together. Jordan Morris is a left winger. He's very good. Prior to this latest injury, which he's now, I would say about 85% of the way back from, he was playing at a best 11 clip. He was either a goal or assist basically every 90 minutes. There aren't a lot of guys who do that in MLS. It's dropped now. He's still recovering. It's dropped. But part of that drop is he doesn't fit well with Nuhu because neither of those guys can take anybody off the dribble. If it was a traditional left winger on that left side, a guy who had his, chalk on an Insignia type who has chalk on his boots, you would say, okay, Nuhu actually fits because you just hang back, man. Play left fullback as a left center back, essentially. But with Morris, who loves to come inside and who's not a 1v1 player, you need a left fullback who can provide that attacking width and depth. And these two guys, when they do it, it's not, I'm not going to say it's Keystone Cop stuff, but like they make each other worse.
They certainly don't. They don't complement each other at all. They don't seem to combine almost. Like I haven't ever looked at this, but my suspicion is they just don't even pass to each other very much because they don't complement each other at all.
Yeah.
Walk me through what's going on as far as the midfield right now, Jeremiah, because we know João Paulo's absence, both in the CCL run, they managed to overcome it, but it was going to be this hole, and then there've been injuries, there's been rotation. Who's going to be the guy there? Because it seems like Roldan is destined to go back to that winger spot, or at least I'm hoping that's the case.
That's a very good question. Obviously, it wasn't. They only had to play essentially 2/3 of one match without João Paulo in Champions League, and Obed Vargas came in, and he replaced him well in that game, but he also replaced him well for the next couple months. The Sounders. It's easy to forget, but they went on a really good run right after CCL. They went 6-2-1. I think it was their record. They were, playing as well as anyone in the league. They stood toe to toe with LAFC. You could go down that period, and they looked to be, to me, to like MLS Cup contenders. But then shortly after Vargas went down, which was right after which I guess was in the LAFC game. But they really have struggled to replace him at all. They've tried something like 6 different partners, I think, with Albert Rusnak, and none of them have really stood. They tried Kellen Rowe there. They've tried Danny Leyva, who I think has probably shown the most potential of being having some real upside. They have tried Christian Roldan there. He's looked okay, but something doesn't. People keep saying he's a natural 6. And that's where he should play. But he hasn't really ever been asked to be a true 6 in the formation. He's always had a more defensive partner when he's played in the central midfield. First it was Ozzy Alonso, then it was Gustav Svensson. And so I'm not quite sure if he's able to carry the load of a 6. And obviously the Sounders are better off when Albert Rusnak is getting into the attack. Christian Roldan seems to be effective in the attack as well. And so I think the hope is that they can sort of get Danny Leyva or maybe Josh Atencio, who has struggled to stay healthy and it seems to be fit now. But if one of them can grab a hold of that position, maybe they can stabilize the defensive midfield. But we're running out of time here to sort of keep auditioning people. Danny Leyva played their last game.
He was good. He was really good. Yeah. Yeah. What's your confidence level going down the stretch here?
I mean, I still think they're going to make the playoffs just because the math tells me that it's likely. Although I guess the various projections have it, close to 50-50, which I think is probably fair. But I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I have to admit though, I won't be surprised if they don't make it.
If they don't make it, Jeremiah, we tried to tackle this question on Extra Time, and maybe you're better equipped to answer it. What's an acceptable season in MLS for them, given, and Alexia, I know you're talking CCL, but they have it forever, given they won CCL? What is acceptable? Not good, just acceptable.
I mean, you win CCL, I think it's hard to argue that it was a unsuccessful season when you make history, right? So I think you always to some degree, like in a vague sense of, can you be happy about this season? If you fast forward 5 years from now and the Sounders are still a competitive MLS team, contending for MLS Cups, no one's going to care that they missed the playoffs the year that they made, that they won CCL. I mean, the CCL thing is history. That will be an important aspect of an important achievement from now.
See, he doesn't agree, Jeremiah.
Yeah, the dog
I don't know what your
BS.
dog's name, but it does not agree.
No,
I
but
don't believe that if they don't make the playoffs at the end of this year, the Sounders fans are going to be all like, as
oh
you
no,
said, puppies
I
in
think
sunshine of like, hey, but it's all good, bro.
no, we're all prisoners of the moment. We're all prisoners of the moment. It will be, if the day the Sounders are eliminated from this season, it will be very disappointing. Sounders fans will be up in arms. There's going to be, we're already seeing small but vocal contingents of the fan base saying that that Brian Schmetzer should be fired, that they need to overhaul this roster. And I guarantee, like, the day that they go out, those voices will be very, very loud. Now, I made a joke on Twitter about how, most of the people that are saying this have been want all credit for saying they were predicting this. Of course, these are the same people that have been predicting it for 5 years, every year, and saying how MLS is passing the Sounders by. But so yeah, it's going to be disappointing when they go out. I'm just saying, in the long arc of history, does missing the playoffs this year matter? I don't, probably not, but it's still going to be disappointing, and they still need to look at what they can fix. But it's going to be really tempting to look at this roster and say, we're going to get João Paulo back next year. We're going to get Obed Vargas next year. Hopefully, Raul Ruiz can stay healthy. Maybe, Nico Ladero is a little, I don't know. I think Ladero is maybe a little bit more of a concern, but, Jordan Morris will be another year removed from his surgery. You go down the list, and it's going to be tempting to run back the core, no matter what happens this year.
You have it from Jeremiah Oshan, Sounders fans already thinking about next year. This year, loss, over, playoffs, out of reach. Just to point back, Raul Ruiz is back. That's a big one that we didn't really talk about right here. But when they were winning after CCL, and in that CCL final, guess who was scoring goals? It was Raul. Yeah. Just 5 goals this year, limited time. Jeremiah, thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, over to Sounders at Heart. If you want more Sounders coverage, you probably already know that. Let's keep it rolling here with Nashville. Ben Wright, I invited you in. Great article from him on Speedway Soccer about what's gone wrong with Nashville, Doyle. Some of it's very, very, very obvious, which is Tani and nobody else. The other side is, as Dax McCarty said after this loss at home to Minnesota, is that they're just not winning in either box. That includes their own box. It just seems like between mistakes and space that other teams weren't able to find and exploit in previous seasons, Nashville is just a little bit easier to play against. What's your diagnosis of this team right now?
Exactly that. They're just they're a lot easier to play against than they have been at any point. And the press conference that Dax gave afterwards, he called everybody out. He said it's just the will to do your job, and I'm not going to disagree with that. If you like, Nashville were miserable to play against the past 2 years. They're just not that this year. And it goes all the way down to Walker Zimmerman, who, if you're watching on YouTube, you just saw him give away a cheap pass that led to the first Minnesota goal. Joe Willis is having a terrible year by his standards. And in the scope of how this team is built, because they only have one truly elite attacking player, their whole identity is, we're going to be miserable to play against. We're going to win at the margins. And if you stop winning at the margins, then it all falls on that one guy. So it's just this cascade of failures that's put them in what feels like a really, really precarious situation.
All right, Ben, vibe check from you in Nashville right now. What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of this is new territory for Nashville, even going all the way back to USL. I don't think they've had a stretch like this. I mean, I just looked at it going back to the international break in early June. They've taken 11 points from 12 games since then. CJ Sapong hasn't scored since May. Randall Leal hasn't scored since May 1st. Alex Muehl hasn't scored since May. I mean, essentially, the front three is producing nothing outside of Hani Mukhtar. And so I think, like Doyle was saying, it's a combination of that and then just pretty, I guess, maybe they're characteristic at this point since they've been happening so much, but just a lot of defensive mistakes. And I think that's kind of been a little bit head scratching for fans because there's not like a clear like systemic issue that you can point to and say this is why they're conceding goals. It's just various mistakes all over the place.
Just individual errors is what you're saying.
I think more than anything else. I mean,
Ben, I'm gonna push back on that. Like specifically, we are seeing. If you dig into the second spectrum numbers, we are seeing like they are worse at getting pressure to the ball all over the field, but especially in the defensive third. So there have been individual mistakes. I agree with that, but like it seems like there's just this team-wide malaise, and I don't know whether it's just from having almost too much continuity, or it's because 3 years of not having the ability to win a game 3-0 essentially has just taken its toll. But I can't sit here and buy that it's individual mistakes. Like there's something structural that's happened here.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think I would probably say I might classify not pressuring a ball as a mistake. I mean, I'm thinking back to that Toronto game, the first goal where Jonathan Osorio just walked by Dax McCarty. I mean, he mentioned it in his press conference. I think part of it is they're getting old. This is an older team. Especially in midfield. I mean, Dax McCarty is 35. Anibal Godoy has been hurt for most of the year. He's above 30. Sean Davis has come in and played essentially every minute. So it's an older and a thinner roster than they've ever had. And then, yeah, I don't know if we can argue if it's individual mistakes or a systemic issue, but I mean, they're conceding the type of goals that they just haven't conceded before. And so I think you could paper over the cracks of just having Hani Mukhtar in attack when you were a good defensive team, but now they're not a good defensive team. And Mukhtar is playing better than he did last year, and it's not enough.
Let me pick at that then. 3 years in, why are we talking about it as only Hani Mukhtar in attack? Like this front office has gone out. They got Chandra Cadiz. Chandra Cadiz was used in very limited minutes over the first 2 years. He's gone. They got Rodrigo Pinheiro, who has about 100 more MLS minutes than I do. He's gone. They went out and got 16. Or so he's got 16 more MLS minutes than I do. They got Ake Loba, record signing this time last year. Gave him half a year. Said, okay, you know what? It'll be better in 2022. He's playing less in 2022 than he did in 2021. Those are three of the biggest signings that like this team has ever made. Now, Hani Mukhtar's being the in there is probably I think the second biggest spent. My understanding is that Gary Smith had a say in all of those, especially the Ake Loba one. What has happened? Why has it feels like the coach has handcuffed himself here and said, you know what, it's going to be all Hani.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest issue the team has had over the last 3 years. I mean, they've known that secondary scoring is an issue, and clearly they've attempted to address it because they've spent money on three big players, and they just haven't worked out. And I don't know if that ultimately is a scouting issue. I'm not sure it is because all three of those guys produced before they got to MLS. Pinheiro especially is producing a ton now that he's left. But all three of them just completely stagnated once they got here. So whether it's a scouting issue or just a failure from the coaching staff to integrate them or both, I mean, that has to be addressed this winter because they can't have another season of just Mukhtar plus no one else.
What does the front office say about that side of things? I know there was a lot of, hey, preach patience with Ake Loba, but to be honest, I think that period's over. Like it just feels like at this point, you know, they got to find a way to salvage some part of that investment and move on. So, you know, the coach is not playing these guys. You're not getting production. What does Mike Jacobs say about all this?
Yeah, I really don't know. And I don't know how they're going to handle it. I wouldn't be shocked if they look at a buyout this year. I mean, just because he's been kind of just he hasn't produced anything and he's taking up a DP spot, which I think is a net negative. I mean, he's spent the last two matches injured. And I think probably the most damning piece of evidence is that there's not really been any difference in the team with him out. Like no one would even notice that he's gone. But he's taking up a DP spot. Hani Mukhtar is taking a DP spot. He's a great signing. Walker Zimmerman is taking the third DP spot, which I think you can argue if that was the best use of it. But they're getting production from two, and that third is just absolutely killing them.
Nashville, Dallas, Sunday. Nashville gets a reprieve midweek. Of course, they're going back home. I mean, not going back home. They've been home, but they got less wins than losses at home. That's the finale of the weekend, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Charlie and I'll be live afterwards. MLS After Dark. Does this team make the playoffs, Ben?
I think you can flip a coin. I really don't know. After Dallas on Sunday, they play Vancouver, Colorado, and then the LA Galaxy. All three of those teams are within 3 points of them, and I think that stretch is gonna determine if they make it or not.
All right, that's where we're at. 6 pointers. Been right. Speedway Soccer. Follow him on Twitter. You see him down here in the Twitter live. If you need that, if you're not listening, Ben Wright. That's easy enough. WRIT. RIGHT. Alex Windley's next with us on Inter Miami. Alex, I've invited you in, so either invite yourself or accept my invite. Inter Miami had 3-2 win against NYCFC. We talked about NYCFC pretty in depth on Extra Time on Monday, Doyle, but we didn't talk Inter Miami.
Right.
I mean, I wanted to give up on them. I wanted to hand them the spoon early on, and here they are in a packed field sitting above the line.
They are, and they have been a very good team just based on results in MLS since Phil Neville benched Gonzalo Higuain back at the start of April. And getting kind of a miracle result here, because I thought NYCFC outplayed them and then just shot themselves in the foot. Getting a miracle result here, with this much pressure against a good team and then climbing above the line, it's kind of in keeping with what we've seen from Miami this season. They do not quit, and that's been true even with Higuain coming back into the mix. I thought he was going to be lost to this team for good when Phil Neville had that press conference and benched the guy. But over the past month, you could argue that he's been their MVP. Now, obviously, it's Alejandro Pozuelo in this game, but they're not above the line. If Higuain, I think he's got like 7 goals in his last 9 games, 7 goals and a couple assists. He's been fantastic.
Alex is here. You can follow her work with 5 Reasons Sports. She's also the co-host of the Heron Report. Alex, what's the state of things from your point of view down in South Florida?
Yeah, I think Doyle's pretty spot on about that. I'd still say that Miami, they don't play the prettiest soccer, but they're getting it done. And if you listen to Phil Neville after, so many of his post-match conferences, he'll say, this team has grit. The players like each other. They're fighting for each other. Compared to last season, we didn't see this happening. And, just based off of that alone, the team, they're getting results because of this. Inter Miami last season wouldn't have won. I don't even think they would have scored 3 goals against NYCFC last season. So the fact that they're still in the playoff hunt, when I think a lot of us did believe that they would be at the bottom of the East at this point this year, I think it's a testament to, what Phil Neville and Chris Henderson did with this roster, bringing in a guy like Pozuelo for what was essentially peanuts. And I will say the coaching from Neville as well, just to get the results out of these players and the team bonding. It's just been really phenomenal to see the turnaround.
Go ahead, Doyle.
I think we were about to ask the same
Probably
question.
The same question, yeah.
How is Pozuelo fit in, and do you expect him to be back next year? Because there were some quotes after the game that this guy is here playing for a contract. This guy is playing to be in Miami long term.
Yeah, and I think next season Inter Miami will have DP spots open, and I know Pozuelo, he really likes Miami. In his introductory conference, he talked about his kids loving it here. He likes the weather. Obviously, it helps a lot. And Neville did say yes, Pozuelo is playing for a contract, but the way he's just been able to elevate this team, surely Miami and Chris Henderson will be thinking about bringing him in next season as well, because of just the impact he's had. And he's a DP that has league experience compared to some of the other ones that Miami brought in in previous years. The Rodolfo Pizarros, they didn't work out. But Matuidi, that definitely didn't work out. Even Higuain at times, Higuain at times, he probably wasn't the best, but like you said, he's had a huge turnaround. And I think Neville benching him earlier in the season it probably did hurt his ego a little bit, but ever since then, I've just heard that, Higuain has really just embraced being that veteran and that role off the bench. And, we've seen him come off the bench and score, and now he's starting because Campana is out injured. And, it's just everyone buying into what Neville has done. And Pozuelo, for sure in the future, I'm sure he's in consideration to return to Miami.
Higuain, can I just ask the odds of Higuain being back?
Yeah, you got it.
Next year.
very good question. I think it all depends on what Chris Henderson wants to do. I know he's talked about wanting to bring in some of the academy guys and try to get the roster younger. But Higuain, he's just been probably so in form, and it talking about it now, like it's a no-brainer bring him back. But I think that's all dependent on the front office and whether Higuain retires or if he wants to return or if the club even wants to bring him back. But in his current form, if it's possible to bring him back on a non-DP contract, I think that would be huge for Miami. But if that's not possible, I could definitely see him not returning.
I'm ringing the bell for a max TAM deal for Higuain next year. He's been so good. He's been so much fun to watch, and it would allow them to keep Campana, which I think is crucial going forward. I think he's a building block type of piece. We've spent a lot of time talking about the attackers because that's fun. Is there an unsung hero on this team in terms of the back line or defensive midfield or even the fullbacks?
Oh, for sure. Gregory, for one, he's been that anchor every game when he's not suspended due to yellow card accumulation. He's been that anchor for Inter Miami. He's the captain. He's been an absolute Rolls Royce for the team. He does everything. He's literally he just destroys everything through the middle. And him and his midfield partner Jean Mota as well. Mota has slowly started to come into his own since coming to the league, and he's got that Hollywood pass in him, and we've seen it so many times on the field, and he's just been quietly gaining his form throughout the season. And I also want to shout out Chris McVeigh. He's played every single minute of every game this season for Inter Miami, and he's just a utility player for Phil Neville. He's been sent out at left back. He's a central defensive midfielder. He's played as center back, and he's just that one guy that coaches love to have where they can play in multiple positions. Also, I do want to shout out Damian Lowe as well. I know he can be quite aggressive sometimes, but there are so many moments for Inter Miami that he's just besides that own goal against Orlando, but so many times where he's just been there and aggressive at the right times for Phil Neville and the team. So if anything, it's definitely those four guys that I'd have to give kudos to.
I'm gonna have to throw out Drake Callender as well. He's in that top 10 tier of goalkeepers. By the way, it's a Serie A Legends Night on Saturday at Drive Pink Stadium. Miami hosting Toronto at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. MLS Live on ESPN Plus. Go follow Alex's work. She's doing a great job. The first place I go if I want to know about Inter Miami. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, let's speaking of Toronto FC, let's talk Toronto. Got to bring Miachael Singh in here in just a second. Let's see, Michael, invite to speak. 3-1 win against Portland. Guess who scored the game-winning goals, let's call them? Lorenzo Insigne, as well as Bernadeschi, which you'll see if you're watching YouTube, or you can go over to MLSsoccer.com and check those out. Michael, you just got done with availability at training. What did you hear? How much do you believe in this team as a potential playoff team?
Yeah, the vibes right now in Toronto they're exquisite. It's a lot better right now than it was a month ago. It seems like this team's been absolutely transformed and into, if they had a little bit more time, into a serious contender right now in Major League Soccer. As for their playoff hopes, 9 games left, 4 points out. They're in 12th place in the Eastern Conference. It won't be easy. Is it out of the question completely? No, it's not out of the question. I think it's still in their own fate. They have the potential right now, I think, especially when you consider who they're facing, they have the potential to win 7, maybe 8 of their last 9 games. So we'll see how this plays out. This is really a new-look Toronto FC team, so it really is on a game-by-game basis, and it starts tomorrow night against the New England Revolution.
Huge game.
Yeah,
huge game.
This week is kind of make or break for this Toronto team. If they can take 4 points, if they take 6 points, they're above the playoff line. And the way they're playing, they look like a team that could take 6 points. And one of the things I've kind of harped on in my column, Michael, is that the integration of these guys, Insigne and Bernadeschi, but also Richie Larea and Krishito at left back. It's happened almost instantly. They look like they have all been playing in this Bob Bradley system for 5 years. Are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised, to be honest, how quickly this team has been able to mesh together, and some of the players have really hit the ground running. I think it took Insigne coming off a calf injury a couple of games to really find his form. But on Saturday night, like we saw something that was I don't know if we've ever seen at BMO Field in a Toronto FC kit. It was a player that was a different class than the rest of the competition. So that part was really exciting. I got to give a shout out and a lot of love to Domenico Krishito, who's been a little bit overshadowed by his fellow former, or I guess, Italian internationals. Mimo's obviously the former Italian international, but he's been able to really, the biggest question mark about this team, I think, was the back line. But Mimo's come in and really become an outlet for the team, where they're building a lot of their breakouts through Mimo down that left-hand side. So his decision-making, linking up with Insigne, is really special. And, I think what's the most impressive part, Doyle, is that these guys who have now they've been brought into the team, they're bringing out the best of the guys who were already there. The guys like the Jonathan Osorio, the Michael Bradley. Michael Bradley looks like he's turned back the clock like 10
It's
years.
awesome.
And
So fun.
So fun to watch. He's playing some extraordinary football right now. And it's because of the players that's been around them. The system's been working. And now we're seeing each player on the field, I think, put in their best shifts night after night, which is a fun thing to see.
What's the personality, by the way, that Bernadeschi's brought to the club? Because he just looks like we're watching on YouTube right now, him shed his shirt after his goal. And I'm thinking back to his opening press conference, which he basically turned into like a club promoter's dream. I think an all white linen. He looks like a guy who has a ton of personality, and he plays like a Mack truck with elite touch, awareness, vision, and the ability to finish. Like he's my favorite player in the league to watch right now.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the sentiment that's going around a lot. Like Bernadeschi, everyone's coming away from TFC games talking about him because he does have that style of play, and man, this guy knows how to rile up a crowd. He's a fan favorite. Like he's already become a fan favorite because of that personality. It's so contagious, the way that he can really ignite a fan base. He's very personable. He says all the right things. He's got like I said, like a little bit of a contagious smile almost when he's here. And whenever we see like these big names come over to MLS, there's always a stigma. Do they really want to be here? Is this really the place they want to be? And with Bernadeschi, I think there's no question based on his body language and just how bought in he seems to being here in Toronto. So I think that part is what's really really grown and what's really helped him get settled in here with the fan base.
A lot of answers up top. Still some questions at the back, and this is the big one for Toronto. We've talked about how Krishito has settled the back line, and I think just having the ball more and being more dangerous going forward has settled the back line. But I'm not sure we even know at this point what the starting center backs are. Like who down the stretch here, who do you expect to see, and are they going to be good enough to post some ones and some zeros?
It's Lucas McNaughton and Chris Mavinga. Those are the starting center backs for this team right now down the stretch. They've done the last couple of games. They formed a pretty formidable pairing. And I say that with the context that they're not being asked to do an outrageous amount of defending anymore, because this is a team that obviously loves playing with the ball now. And when you have guys up the pitch like Insigne and Bernadeschi, even Osorio, who's really started to come into his own, it takes pressure off your back line to do as much work and as much defending. The roles that they're being asked to do, similar in the way that Michael Bradley has kind of settled into his role, is simply get the ball to either Richie Krishito or Michael Bradley. They're not being asked to do too much. I agree with you. There's a question mark whether they'll be able to do what's being asked of them the rest of the way. But right now, those are the guys, and they're mobile center backs who can cover and just simply do enough, I hope, to get this team across the line.
7:30 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That's tomorrow, August 17th. Toronto hosting New England. That's a 6-pointer, no doubt about it. And then this weekend, another big game. Miami hosting Toronto. Let me ask you this, because he's absolutely balling right now, and I just wonder how long he will be balling in red. Jonathan Osorio's future. If you had to predict where he would be in 2023, what would you predict?
That's a tough question. If I had to predict, I would say he's back with Toronto FC. And I say that just because it's very rare, for a player to have spend their whole career essentially with one club in Major League Soccer nowadays. You don't see it too often. But also, you look at what happened with Richie Larea and his move over to Nottingham Forest. You know, the grass isn't always greener. You might think that Europe is sort of your dream move, but at the end of the day, if you're going to go over there, you're going to be a reserve depth piece. Is that really better than being the face of the franchise essentially here in Toronto? A guy who's going to have a statue essentially built out for him, you know, possibly be the next captain for this club when Michael Bradley decides to hang him up. Is it really better than leaving what's already in front of us? So if I had to predict, I would say he's back in TFC red. And just to throw out some chaos here, a little bit off note, but TFC's playoff chances could come down to Alejandro Pozuelo and Greg Vanney. They could be in those. It could be in that they could control TFC's destiny in that regard, because they played the Galaxy and Inter Miami twice. So storylines, narratives, chaos. Let's go.
Let's go. Michael Singh, the parlay. At Michael Singh 94 on Twitter, covering Toronto FC from back to front. Always good to chat, Michael. Thanks, man. All right, let's talk New England Revolution at 13. Beat DC in week 25, a little 1-0 win. Yeah, look, they have just 2 losses in their last 9, Doyle, but just 2 wins in that time. And I was doing my top attacking trios in MLS before this, working on a column for tomorrow. And it would have been easy money that the Revs would have basically been at the top of this list over the last couple of years with Buxa and Bo and Heel and, you know, Tejan. Even within that, you would go 4 deep of just ultimate best 11 quality. It's not like that right now. You got Barrero easing in. Veroni's been hurt. It's just kind of Heel, and then they're piecing it together a little bit. What's going on with the Revs in your mind?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it just in terms of the personnel, right? It's been a weird sort of transition year. One thing I should correct, they've only lost twice in their last 15. And one of those was at NYCFC in that weird game where they gave up 3 penalties in the first half. And the next was the next game, a loss at Philadelphia. So everybody else,
forgivable losses, let's call them.
Exactly. And what they've done primarily to get to this point where they're on the verge of climbing back above the line is tighten it up through central midfield. And that comes down to the shape. Like, we crushed Bruce Arena in the playoffs for the way his team went out, and then of course that huge loss to Pumas in CCL because he asked Matt Polster to defend 1v3 in central midfield. That 4-4-2 wide diamond was spectacular at times during last season's run to the Supporters Shield. They were able to just overwhelm teams with attack. It was so much fun to watch. But against better teams, they ended up having to chase the game a ton. And it took a couple of absolutely crushing losses for Bruce to make that switch. Now he's made that switch. They play a 4-2-3-1, basically. Carlos Heel is a traditional number 10. Matt Polster and Tommy McNamara are the deep lying midfielders. And then what's happened because of those injuries, they've had to juggle that front line. And that's why they're winning games 1-0 or drawing games 1-1 instead of putting up the types of numbers in attack that they had last year. And a big help in all this is the play of Georgie Petrovich.
Yeah, he's a boss.
He's been incredible, Wiebe. Like he's been like he's got about 1,200 minutes so far. Like, he's, in terms of like the eye test and the advanced numbers, he's having a better season than Matt Turner did last year. Like, he is first in the league right now. And I just because I was looking at Drake Callender's number over at American Soccer Analysis, goals minus XG, and you want to be in the negative because you want to give up fewer goals than you're expecting. He's the top in the league in that category. Yeah. 7
goals XG would expect him to give up. He has not given up, and that is in just over 1,000 minutes. It is
Yeah.
frankly absurd.
He's been incredible, and they have needed all of this to get to this point. Guy like the shape change, Carlos Heel still playing at an MVP caliber, Petrovich playing at a goalkeeper. They've needed all of this because it's been a year of such flux. They sold 3 of their 4 best players. Gustavo Bo was awesome. He got hurt. Barrero looked great as a replacement for Tejan Buchanan. He got hurt, and so it's been like they've just been juggling
Josie didn't work. They had to
at
find a way
all.
to move him. I mean, it's just been a cascade.
It has, and on top of that, Andrew Farrell and Henry Kessler have spent a lot of time hurt, and at no point have they been as good this year as they were last year. But here they are, right? They're like, I actually think they're going to make the playoffs because as these guys get healthy down the stretch, it wouldn't shock me at all to see the Revs go something like 5-1-2 over their final 8 games. And it's Bruce Arena, man. Once you get him to the playoffs, he's got what, 5 of those MLS Cup rings. He's got those for a reason.
Well, they're in Canada this week. They are starting the week, of course, against Toronto FC on Wednesday night, and then
that's
on
the big
Saturday,
one, Weeby. That's what I'm going to open a nice bottle of red wine and light a candle for that game because that is a huge game.
Sounds like a wonderful night. And then at Montreal on Saturday. Nice little road tip for Charlie Davies. He was pretty excited about that one. 2 world-class cities going to Canada. Are the Revs right now? They are trying to fight to get above the line. It is very, very packed in the Eastern Conference from 5th all the way to, you know what, I'm just going to cut it off at 13th because that's a 5-point gap between 5th Columbus and 13th Atlanta. Anything can happen. The Revs are just below on wins. That's the first tiebreaker there. All right, let's keep it going here on this power ranking show. Again, you can go to MLSsoccer.com and the MLS app for all the rankings. Columbus Crew at number 9. They drop 1 spot. They drew 1-1 with Colorado in week 25. Another sort of quietly semi-hot team, unbeaten in 11 of the last 12.
Yeah, they've done it by like adding just a little bit of spice to the way they usually play. Right. If you think about Caleb Porter teams, they've tended to be almost always a 4-2-3-1, though he changed that shape a little bit earlier this year. Almost always a mid block, try to control the ball, try to swing it from side to side. And when you play like that, you could sometimes forget to play forward at times. And honestly, that's what happened with the Crew earlier this year. Like they were so ponderous that they weren't able to create the type of penetration at pace, dynamic superiority that leads to goals. Well, they went out and they spent $10 million on the guy wearing number 9 that you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing him put the ball in the back of net right now. And he's been like a jolt of lightning for this whole attack because Cucho is he's like 2017, 2018 Joseph Martinez, where he is always making those hard, direct runs into the box, creating lanes for himself and creating avenues for the rest of the attack. And, guys like that are absolutely worth their weight in gold. And he has fixed so many of the issues that had this team down in like 11th, 12th place 2 months ago.
I was trying to do, if you were going to do the third attacking option for this team, because you had Cucho and Zelarayan, and like you start at that starting point, I'm like, okay, if I'm ranking these teams, they're probably up there. And look, the Crew could also, the Rapids could also be there in a way, because you have Diego Rubio, who's having maybe the most under the radar elite attacking season in the league right now. Gyasi Zardes, his numbers are starting to come up. But then who's the third? With the Crew, who do you think is the third most effective or important attacking player?
Yeah, it's the big question. They went out and they brought in some wingers this offseason. None of them have really stood out. They went out last year and they brought in some wingers. Alexandre Matan has already been sort of shipped out. I don't think he produced a goal or an assist in about 1,000 MLS minutes. Derek Etienne is probably the best of them. Derek Etienne,
I think it's Etienne.
Yeah, he's a good player. I mean, he was awesome in MLS Cup a couple of years ago, but he's not like, you don't look at Derek Etienne and say, "Oh man, this is Columbus's big 3." And I think that is a difference between, hey, this is a solid playoff team that if they tighten up defensively and Cucho and Zelarayan do what they do, they could make a run. versus like if they had that third piece, we'd be talking about them on like, yeah, they could end up on 65 points. Yeah, they're one of the absolute favorites going to the playoffs. Like lacking that, it's tough. And to bring it back to Etienne, think back to that playoff run. He was like, he had a goal in MLS Cup, and I think a goal and assist in MLS Cup. He was lighting teams up from the wing during that playoff run. When he plays like that, the Crew looked like one of the best teams in the league. But Derek Etienne's never been able to play like that week after week after week throughout his career. It's very streaky. It's very like you get him one week and he's amazing, and the next week he doesn't show up at all. So until they answer that, we're talking about a team that can beat you, that looks pretty good at times, but doesn't have the same sort of ceiling that I think the very elite teams in this league do, certainly in attack.
Guess who leads the Crew in non-penalty XG? Hey, it's Dab God, Derek Etienne. Guess who leads them in expected assists? Oh, that's Lucas Zelarayan, but second is Derek Etienne.
Yeah.
So if they get production out of that third one, the first two guys are pretty good, and this defense continues to be solid. All right, let's keep it rolling. Crew, of course, in the playoffs right now, 5th in the Eastern Conference. We are in the top 10 right now, rolling through the power rankings. And of course, I've lost my sheet of where we're going next.
Dallas.
Push it for me, Phil. I've lost it. Dallas is up next. FC Dallas added a big piece on the Revs' dime, apparently, in the summer window. That would be Sebastian Lletget, and he just fits right in, Doyle. I think what you wrote about them in your column, which is always a must-read on Mondays, is pretty fitting. The question is this sort of a feature going forward, or is it a little bit of a bug right now, depending on the opposition?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because it's San Jose at home, and if you don't beat San Jose at home these days, then you're not, you're not a serious playoff team, and obviously just taking care of business in that regard for Dallas. But it was interesting with their shape because Lletget he's more dynamic moving out of midfield into the attacking third and even into the box than Paxton Pomykal, Siki Sabaling, and Brendan Cervania have been. Like those guys are more like classic, hang back number 8 kind of orchestrate midfielders. Well, I'm not sure Sabaling fits that mold, but he certainly hasn't been an attacking threat. Whereas just by pushing into the attack, Lletget got himself 2 assists in that in this game. So I feel like this has the potential to unlock something for Dallas, especially if when Pomykal is back full time, Nico Estevez sort of switches the midfield balance because he's had Pomykal all year playing on the left side of that 3-man midfield. I think if you switch him on the right and you put Lletget on the left, because Lletget is right-footed and Pomykal's left-footed, you open up more of the field for them to sort of spray balls to and to find runners in. And like that just makes a team significantly more dangerous, especially because Dallas have had a lot of those problems I was talking about with the Crew, just being really ponderous and build up and forgetting to create penetration out of your possession. Those have been Dallas's issue all year long. So they can fix that with, I think the addition of Lletget and then shifting those midfield roles. But we kind of saw it against San Jose, but like I said at the top, man, I don't know if that's because Dallas are that much better right now or because they were playing San Jose.
I think we're going to find something out on Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, Dallas, Philadelphia, MLS Live on ESPN+. That's a big game cross-conference. 2 teams that want to say they have MLS Cup aspirations. Philly, I think, a little bit closer to being able to confirm that. Speaking of attacking trios, theirs is pretty good. So is Dallas. Alan Velasco, Doyle, is one of those guys that when you look at what the business Dallas did, you wondered, okay, what are they going to do with this money? How are they going to invest it? And if they do, are they going to invest it in the right guy? If you're watching on YouTube right now, you just saw this goal from Velasco in this game, cuts it back on his right foot, drives it. Maybe you could argue that the goalkeeper could do a better job, but he's had a number of moments this year kind of like this. Impressive ones, moments that say, okay, well, he's getting better and he's only going to get better. What's your early scouting report?
I think that he's getting better and he's probably going to continue to get better. He's really gifted with the ball. He's got a great shot from distance. he likes to combine. He's not necessarily incredible at it at this point, but you could see him trying to do the right things. But as with most young players, he can drift out of games. Like he can have entire games where you forget he's out there, and he's 19. He's playing in a new country in a new culture for the first time, and there's going to be a learning curve. But Dallas have done a really nice job of putting him in a position, in a situation where he can succeed and get better. And the same goes for their homegrown guys. Like Jesus Ferreira is playing the way he's playing. It's not entirely down to Jesus Ferreira, which is not to take anything away from the kid, but like they have done a good job of understanding how to make young players, how to turn their potential into productivity, and then to turn that into money. And that is for a lot of teams in this sport of ours. That's the name of the game.
Let's go to Austin next. Keep it in Texas. Austin are number 3 in these power rankings. Crazy, wild, insane, really fun win, and I'm sure even more fun to call against Sporting Kansas City at home. Though a little frustrating at times for the Verde and Black faithful. Michael Lahoud, what's up, man? How you doing?
Oh boy, there are my guys. How you guys doing? I'm trying to stay relatively cool in the AC here because it's baking outside.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it felt a little hot for Josh Wolf and Austin down 3-1 to Kansas City. That's not a game at home that you want to lose. And they didn't lose, but it took sort of a Herculean effort. What did you make of this game overall and the sort of narrative that's followed them around a bit at home, which is that they get down and have to fight their way back?
Yeah, when it was the second half was starting, and you're my boy, Wiebe. I had a moment where I took a deep breath and I closed my eyes and I thought, there's one person I know in this world that's popping bottles back in Kansas City right now.
Oh, give me a break. Give me a break. You've learned from Charlie. Troll game strong.
It was something that I don't think I've seen in a while, to see a stadium get behind a team, to see the character of the entire team. And really, subs changed the game. At 3-1 down, John Gallagher getting on the score sheet, and Julio Cascante getting goals in back-to-back games. Scored a headed goal last week against, was it San Jose? And then getting a header off of Driussi cross, took a bit of a deflection. But I think the guy who came in and really changed the game was Danny Houston. Felipe Martins getting an assist on his goal. Danny Houston allows them to have a different dynamic. He allows them to be more direct. And this is the Danny Houston that scored all those goals. I think 12 goals when he was in San Jose. He has 3 goals to his name, and they've all been massive goals. He had, I think, the first goal against DC United in that comeback. He had the second goal against FC Dallas in another comeback. And he had the third goal against Sporting Kansas City in a comeback. So if you need a comeback, you call on Danny Houston.
Let's talk about that post-game press conference from Josh Wolf a little bit. I don't know if our listeners saw it or heard it, but he got a little snippy when Chris Bills, our good friend Chris Bills from The Striker, said, when you guys were talking about chasing the game, you guys threw out the blueprint and just went for it. And Josh Wolf did not like that characterization of how this team came back. He said, no, we stick with the blueprint. We don't change that even when we're chasing the game. So Mike, you've watched more of Austin than anybody. Tell us what that blueprint is, and tell us, because I don't care what Josh Wolf says. When they're chasing a game, it absolutely changes. I'm not saying he throws it out, but it absolutely changes. So tell us what the baseline blueprint is for this team, and then how it changed late in this one.
And the question mark going into the season, especially last season, we know that Austin FC was going to have a dynamic, possession-oriented style, and they were successful in creating that foundation. But to be successful in Major League Soccer, I think that's the 4th time I've said that word, but to have success in Major League Soccer, you have to be adaptable, and you have to have resilience. And that's plan B for this team. They have depth on the bench. They have MLS experience that can come in the form of Danny Houston, Felipe Martins coming in, and it allows them to be more direct. And the player that benefits most from that, Sebastian Driussi. Sebastian Driussi, the enigma about him is, where do you play him? Do you play him as a striker, second striker, an attacking mid? You just put him anywhere on the field and he'll figure it out. So Sebastian Driussi benefits from having a player like Danny Houston on the field, because now he stays closer to a target forward, and you play for second balls. And you get wide players like Jean Komenich, who came in and delivered that ball that led to the game-winning goal. You have wingers like Washington Caruso, who I'm so happy was a difference maker, a player that fans were crying out for, and a player who could very well be on the plane to play for Ecuador in the World Cup later this year. And you have Ethan Finley, who had that very opportunistic touch that led the way for Sebastian Driussi to slot home the game-winning goal. And look, teams have to step up when the big moments call for it. And they have the leading goal scorer in MLS, and they have some pieces that give you something different. Now, is giving up 3 goals a recipe for success the rest of the way at home? Probably not. So I think they're going to have to shore up defensively, leaking some of those goals. But they're a team that know that they can score goals, and the resiliency and the character of this team, you can bank on them coming up with a big play. But I'd like to see them, like I said, really nip it in the bud in the back.
When are we going to see Emiliano Rigoni?
Oof. Well, hopefully the next couple weeks. There's a lot of excitement about this player, the type of player who gives more balance on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side, a player who has pedigree, high-level pedigree in Argentina and with Sao Paulo in Brazil, doesn't get any bigger than that in the Western Hemisphere, playing Copa Libertadores. And this is an experienced player. Now, I wish I had his cell on speed dial because I could tell you the exact date when he gets into Austin Bergstrom. I'm sure there's plenty of people listening in who probably have that.
And maybe I just don't. He's not arrived. It's not like he's in training or anything. They're not holding him back. Not a health issue.
No.
It's a visa issue. It's an arrival issue.
Yeah, I think it's strictly down to the visa process and arrival issue. But when he gets here, expect him. And talking with the staff members, expect him to be an immediate contributor. And there's a big game looming around the corner that I personally hope that he's available for, not this week, but the week after, that I'm sure Extra Time and everyone will be just foaming at the mouth for in LAFC. But we got to get him here first.
All right. It is in Minnesota this week on Saturday. Austin, currently second in the Western Conference, 48 points, a nice 9-point gap from Dallas. Looks like they're going to get a home playoff game, and we know how they do it at Q2. Michael, appreciate your time, man.
Wiebe,
I only come for sport. I only come for sporting games, Michael. You know that.
Wiebe, is that home game against LAFC a bonus game?
You know what? I'd be selling T-shirts with bonus game on them. I think I'd made some real good personal allocation money.
We could set up an Extra Time stand before that game outside, selling bonus game T-shirts.
Michael, here's the deal: if I can't guarantee it, but if Austin, let's say they make MLS Cup, if Austin make MLS Cup, I think there's a decent chance I'm coming to Austin, baby. In fact, I'll put it at 100%. We're doing a pre-MLS Cup podcast somewhere from some bar on 6th Street. If Austin make MLS Cup, I guarantee that. How about that?
All right. You know what? From your lips to the players' feet and everyone at Q2 Stadium, Austin FC fans cash receipts and keep them, so they will hold you accountable for that.
I know that those players are looking at what I tweet.
Very online.
All right, LAFC, number 1. They got to get past LAFC if they want to go to MLS Cup. That seems to be the way it is. Drop the nickel on Charlotte Doyle, and this is where we're ending our power ranking show with the number 1 team, who just keep getting stronger, who are chasing a point record, who might be selling Brian Rodriguez in the midst of it. What a just rubberneck season, I guess I would call it, from LAFC. Just everything about it. It's hard to keep up with what's happening, but it's so fun.
Yeah, it's impossible to look away because they score great goals. They have star power. I mean, they had star power arguably more than anybody else in the league at the start of the year. Obviously, with the transfer window they just had. I saw when you put out that who's the best attacking trio in the league tweet, people were answering you, can LAFC be on the list twice? I like the way they have built this team by getting guys, young players from South America and Africa, getting star DPs, like Carlos Vela, but also being really clever and finding TAM value with like a Chicho Arango. And of course, what John Thornton did this offseason, getting going into the market in MLS and getting Kellen Acosta, Ilie Sanchez, who's arguably, MVP caliber player this year. Maxime Crepeau, Ryan Hollingshead. He added 1,000 games worth of MLS experience this offseason. And it's showing because they're just managing their minutes and they're managing the course of the season better than at this point any team in league history. They're on track to end up close to 80 points. The Revs set the points record last year with 73. So it's a masterclass in roster construction. Now, obviously, there are some advantages because Gareth Bale and Giorgio Chiellini will sign in LA at a price that they probably wouldn't sign in Kansas City. So it is a built-in advantage, but we see that in the NBA and Major League Baseball.
But people want to get there are advantages in different ways. Like Sporting Kansas City can build a massive training complex for a fifth of the price that LAFC can based on land value. Like you have to invest in different ways, and location always plays a role. It plays a role in all our lives. Like you decide where to live based on where it is. Like, do I want to live in Northern California where I can go to Lake Tahoe and ski and go to the beach and yeah, sure, that'd be awesome. Okay, well, I got to balance that with the cost of living. Like every club has to figure out how to best make use of their advantages. And yes, the advantage at LA is that famous players want to live there because they vacation there and it's a world-class city. But I get so bored of the like, woe is me, we can't sign Gareth Bales. It's like, well, yeah, we can do other stuff. So find a way to compete.
Right. And the point is, they were on track to set the points record before Gareth Bale and Chiellini arrived. They were already there. And guys like Maxime Crepeau, Kellen Acosta, and Ryan Hollingshead, anybody in the league could have traded for those guys. Anybody in the league could have beat LAFC's offer for those guys, and they didn't. So this team deserves all the credit in the world for being where they are in the standings right now.
Did you see that once again on Tuesday, and Wayne Rooney had to be doing, I don't know if backflips is the right way, but like sighs of relief to see that Bale once again is questionable for load management.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they're going to use these two, he and Chiellini, the rest of the way? Because it's kid glove stuff right now, and I understand why they don't need them. They just won 5-0 with 5 different goal scorers without either of them.
Yeah, I think load management is going to be is going to be a recurring theme here. The ideal is you have them 90 minutes fit for the playoffs. Because let's face it, LAFC, they've already won the Supporter Shield. It's theirs. And I know that, Austin is 6 points back. Philly is 6 points. LAFC, it's theirs. They've won the Supporter Shield. The goal for this team is MLS Cup. And the best way to make sure that, in a tournament setting, you have a great chance of winning MLS Cup is to make sure that Chiellini and Bale are both 90 minutes fit and healthy and good to go. And obviously that dovetails as well with Bale's preparations for the World Cup. He wants to make sure that he's sharp and 90 minutes fit and not burnt out so that when Wales takes the field in Qatar, he's going to be able to handle that. He's going to have his legs under him, and he's going to have the type of sharpness he wants in the final third. So I expect everything geared towards, all of that. I expect them to win the Shield, to set the points record. I don't know if they're going to get 80 points. That's something we discussed on Extra Time, but it's in play. And at the end of the season, the other thing that's in play, Weavy, is we might end up talking about LAFC as just clearly the best MLS team of all time, based upon what they're doing.
Yeah, 8.5. 8.5 over under goals scored this week. DC in town tonight, ESPN Plus, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, and then they go to San Jose on Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern, MLS Live on ESPN Plus. So I'm gonna set it at 8.5 over under goals for LAFC this week. What do you got?
It's DC for the first game, and the second
home
game
against DC, and then at San Jose.
I think I'm taking the over. I think I'm taking the over.
Producer Phil says that's a bad line. Phil,
it is a bad line.
But he went under. He says it's going to be. He says 6.5 is a better line.
6.5. I mean,
I smashed the
six-
over on 6.5.
6.5 feels like an easy over, given the way this team's playing and given the two teams that they're facing. But I don't know. Phil
Maybe seven and a
Phil's
half.
more
Maybe
of a
7.5.
Phil's more of a degenerate than I am, so I don't know. He probably knows more about betting lines.
Oh, we're all MLS degenerates. That's why we're here talking about, thinking about, and discussing the MLS Power Rankings. Get them, MLSsoccer.com or the MLS app. Big thanks to our guests on today's show for week 25. Had a great time chatting with Jeremiah Oshan over at Sounders at Heart. Ben Wright stopped by Speedway Soccer to talk Nashville. We had Alex Windley to talk Inter Miami, Michael Singh on Toronto. Of course, our guy, Michael Lahoud on Austin. We're back every Tuesday live on Twitter Spaces at 2 p.m. Eastern. And this, of course, is on demand on the MLS Today podcast feed. Here's your top 10 for week 25 at 10. The LA Galaxy up a whopping 10 spots after smacking Vancouver. Columbus at 9, San Jose 8, New York City FC dropping a little bit there at 7, Dallas is at 6, and your top 5 is Minnesota, Montreal, Austin, Philly, and LAFC. Doyle, big thanks for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and everything else.
Thanks for driving, Weeby.
Yeah, and thanks for Phil for running this bad boy. We're out of here. We'll see you next week, everybody. Tuesday, Cole Bassett interview on Extra Time. Just teasing it for you. We'll see you later. Adios.